Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Ellison Barber. Savannah is off this morning. We're following breaking news this morning out of South Florida.
The search and rescue operation is underway after a 12-story apartment building partially collapsed in Surfside, Florida. We know one person is dead, according to the town's mayor. No word yet on other casualties or injuries, but firefighters were seen pulling a boy from the rubble. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is on the scene for us this morning. Sam, just start off by telling us what is the very latest on the ground there.
It's a little calmer right now, Joe, than it was when we first got on scene early this morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock. We were watching as fire ladders were carrying responders from balcony to balcony. I could hear the sound of sawing going on as they were looking for people. That is no longer taking place from what I can see right here. I'm going to point you over my shoulder. That's the condominium building. From this side, it looks fine. It is the northeast quadrant that, in the words of both the mayor and the residents who live there, pancaked, literally just collapsed and fell down. We just heard from Surfside's mayor, Charles Burkett, who said that there is no precedent for this kind of thing around here. He is not aware of any buildings in Miami Beach collapsing like this. He said it feels and looks like a bomb went off, but we know it did not. We have to get to the bottom of this. He also expressed his concern for the firefighters who are responding, the fact that there is still a threat right now that building could completely collapse. So they've evacuated at least 50 rooms at a nearby hotel. He also confirmed for us that police said there's been at least one fatality. So that is now officially confirmed through the mayor of Surfside. Right now, the search and rescue effort, Joe, continues. It's hard to see from right here what's going on, but we do know, as you alluded to a second ago, in the overnight hours, there was a rescue, 2 people taken out there, one of whom was a teenage boy carried on a firefighter's shoulder. At least that's what we're hearing from that video and from reports here. I spoke with some neighbors. One woman who lives on the 9th floor, she said, it is my full expectation that I lost friends. She said she's on the 9th floor. She was removed from the part of the building that actually collapsed, but that she is almost positive that there will be fatalities here beyond just the one that I told you about. And the mayor also mentioned the fact that people were able to get out because of the fact that a portion of the building was still standing, so they could move to that area of the building and get out. But it's just hard to imagine, Joe, given the amount of residences here. There's 130 plus, according to the website of the group that manages the Champlain Tower South, which is what this is. And, you know, you're figuring about a third of it collapsed based on the number of lines, vertical units that fell down. That's 40 or 50 units. And lastly, Joe, I would just add that the mayor said they were largely full. This, you know, it's Florida. Obviously, people come down here for vacations, but they are under the impression there were a lot of people in that building when it partially collapsed. We're waiting for more updates this morning, Joe. And Ellison, let me send it back to you.
All right, Sam Brock. Sam, thank you so much. We actually did hear from the mayor of Surfside just a little bit ago, speaking with the Today Show. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
This is just unfathomable, these images that we're seeing in your community. Can you give us any latest information on the number of injuries, any fatalities that may have been happened here this morning?
Yes, my police chief has told me that we transported 2 people to the hospital this morning at least, and 1 has died. We treated 10 people on the site, and we have 15 family units up at our community center, which we're going to be relocating into hotels shortly.
And what's the status of the rescue operation? We saw a massive response by the fire department there, looking for people, looking for survivors. Is that ongoing?
It is. It was ongoing in the middle of the night. We were here, I think it was a little after 2 o'clock, and the dogs came in, and the dogs have been going over the debris. And just tragically, there haven't been any hits for the dogs, and that's a great disappointment. Apparently, when the building came down, it pancaked. So there's just not a lot of voids that they're finding or seeing from the outside, which again that's a tragedy. It was a little bit concerning for us to go inside the building in the middle of the night. But the Miami-Dade Fire Department has been awesome. They've gotten in there, and they're in there risking their lives. I mean, we don't know if the rest of that building's going to come down, but it's just like the Trade Center thing. They ran right into it, and they've been looking for people. I think they did find a gentleman up in there, and they brought him out, which was amazing. So right now, we're just kind of waiting for the sun to come up so we can start doing whatever we can do to see if there's anybody else we can save.
Yeah, Mayor, you brought up something really important. There were, you're wondering how sound the rest of the building is, and we saw people being plucked from their balconies. And I guess my question is, was the building at full capacity? Were all of the 130 plus units occupied?
The building manager, we've spoken to the building manager, and the building was not, it was not lowly occupied. I think there were quite a few people in there.
Yeah.
So that's another terrible thing. But, again, I think apparently the destruction that happened at the back of the building didn't sort of flow into the front of the building, and it allowed people to wake up and make their way down the stairs and out of the building, we're thankful for that.
And Mr. Mayor, we're looking at the images, and they really are devastating. But what happened? I mean, I know the building was built 40 years ago, but do you have any idea what may have caused this? Have residents given you any indication?
Listen, there was roof work that was going on, so we know that that was happening, but you would never expect that to be the issue. I think that this is a catastrophic failure of that building, and we need to try to understand what happened. And we just, it's very early right now, so it's very difficult for us to imagine what could have happened. But obviously the foundation somehow was undermined, and the whole thing came down. I mean, it looks like a bomb went off, but we're pretty sure a bomb didn't go off. So it's something else.
Wow. All right. Well, we wish you guys the best of luck. We know it's going to be a long, long day. The mayor of Surfside, Charles Burkett, thank you so much.
All right, so much devastation, still so many unanswered questions. We will continue to update you on developments throughout the morning. But in the meantime, let's bring you some of other of today's top stories.
Now, doctors are sounding the alarm about the Delta coronavirus variant. The number of cases linked to the variant has doubled in just a couple weeks. And you'll find pockets of the country where the total number of confirmed COVID cases has been climbing. Doctors believe they know the reason.
There's no question that where we're seeing outbreaks is in areas where there's a lower vaccination rate.
Out of our probably last 100 admissions that we've had, I think only 2 were vaccinated for COVID.
Health experts say the solution to the problem, get the vaccine. Now the CDC is weighing in on whether people who are already vaccinated may need booster shots to protect against variants in the future. NBC News Now correspondent Isa Gutierrez is looking into this for us this morning. So, Isa, what is the CDC saying about booster shots?
Good morning, Joe. Right now, the CDC is saying that at this very moment, there's no evidence that a booster shot is necessary. However, they're going to continue to monitor the virus to determine whether one will be necessary for vaccinated people in the future. Here's CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky.
And we really are focused now on what are the data that we're going to need to see, to inform exactly the question that you asked. Most of the data we have so far are out to 6 months. And so that doesn't mean that it ends at 6 months or that your immune protection ends at 6 months. It's just that that's the data that we have so far. And so we're looking for a longer horizon to help make those decisions.
There are a few big questions to figure out in this booster process, which the CDC has discussed. So first is the need to vaccinate more people to get that vaccination rate up before going around and giving boosters. Then there's the question of when is the right time to start giving out booster shots? Is it when we see a rise in cases among people who are vaccinated? Or is it when we see that T cells and antibodies levels are waning in people who are vaccinated, and how would that be determined? Then there's the question of what would these booster shots look like? Would it be a third dose, for example, in the case of the Moderna and the Pfizer shots, or a second dose in the Johnson & Johnson, someone who's gotten a Johnson & Johnson vaccine? Would they look exactly like those first and second doses or those first doses, or would they be targeting specific variants? These are things that we know Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson, all those companies have said that they've been looking at studying now for months. The FDA has said that all of these questions would have to be answered, as well as the safety and side effects of a booster vaccine would have to be looked at before it can be recommended. Joe?
All right, Issa, another issue the CDC is looking at. A panel for the CDC met yesterday to look into the heart conditions connected to young people who got the vaccine. So what did they find? What are the risks for young people and teens?
Yeah, Joe. So this panel determined at the end of their conversation that the benefits of getting the COVID-19 vaccine far outweigh the potential risks for young adults and teens. So they did, however, also agree that a warning should be included in the FDA's official fact sheet for these COVID-19 vaccines. Now, you asked about the risks. We're talking about that the fact that in rare instances, there have been cases where young adults and teens have developed myocarditis after receiving a COVID-19 vaccine. Myocarditis is the swelling of the heart and the surrounding tissues. Now, this has been found specifically in people who have received mRNA vaccines. So we're talking about the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. The CDC has reported 300 cases of myocarditis in young adults and teens. Again, however, they're saying that the benefits of getting the vaccine outweigh these potential risks that occur in rare instances, especially because a large proportion, or the largest proportion, of new COVID-19 cases that we're seeing in the U.S. right now are among young people. Joe?
And Issa, to date, more than 606,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus. So now we're actually seeing the impact the pandemic has had on overall life expectancy. What does that look like?
Yeah, Joe, the life expectancy here in the U.S. plummeted in 2020, widening the life expectancy gap between the United States and other high-income countries across the world. Now, a new study showed that the sharpest decline in life expectancy was among Black and Hispanic Americans. So take a look at these numbers here. These are the new numbers released by the National Center for Health Statistics. For white Americans, average life expectancy at birth dropped by about 1.4 years between 2018 and 2020. But then when you look at the average Hispanic Americans' life expectancy, theirs decreased by about 3.9 years. And then the average lifespan of a Black American decreased by 3.25 years. Joe?
All right. Interesting numbers. Issa, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Colorado is one of the places where health officials are sounding the alarm over the Delta variant. It accounts for nearly 40% of new cases in the state and could become the dominant strain within weeks. NBC News reporter Dasha Burns has the latest.
Hey, Ellison, Colorado has the second most Delta variant cases in the U.S., and the majority of them are concentrated here in Mesa County, and it's led to a rise in hospitalizations. At this point, countywide, hospital capacity is at about 96%, and they're seeing numbers here that are mirroring what they saw back in November of 2020. But of course, Ellison, it's very different now because there is a COVID vaccine. However, Mesa County is lagging behind the rest of the state when it comes to their vaccination rate. And the health experts here say that is the biggest factor and the biggest concern. This is a county that is more rural. It's more conservative. A lot of folks here really focused on personal choice, on lack of government intervention, especially when it comes to the vaccine. What that has translated to is a pretty tough situation for the hospitals in this area. I want you to take a listen to some of what we heard.
Everybody's done. I mean, I think that's part of the challenge, too, is so many people are just done with this. They want to get back to life. But if they would just get vaccinated, we could be there a lot sooner.
Most of the patients that we're seeing hospitalized these days are unvaccinated. And out of our probably last 100 admissions that we've had, I think only 2 were vaccinated for COVID. It's tough. I think if the general public could see what we're experiencing, not only at our hospital, but at other hospitals here in the Valley, it might change the way they think.
Ellison, the county doing all that they can to encourage folks to get vaccinated, everything from mobile vaccination units to lotteries to a vaccination clinic at a country music festival that's coming up here this week and is going to be bringing thousands to the area, which is another concern as this Delta variant rips through this community. And at this point, the folks in the hospital behind me, the staff here, struggling to see the rest of the state and much of the rest of the country getting back to a new normal while they are still in the thick of the battle against COVID-19 here, Ellison.
For more on the pandemic, let's bring in Dr. Bob Lahita. He's the director of autoimmune and rheumatic diseases at St. Joseph Health. Dr. Lahita, always good to have you on. So as we just saw from Dash's reporting there, it's the unvaccinated who are almost the main ones ending up in the hospital with COVID. Do you think that is enough? That's the thing that's going to convince more people who aren't vaccinated to actually get the vaccine?
Well, Joe, it's a difficult situation. You know, people don't realize the importance of being vaccinated and how protective it is, especially the 2 shots from Moderna and Pfizer, protecting against the Delta and the Kappa. A Kappa is another variant from India, which we're looking for. And we know that the Delta virus, the Delta variant, is in this country. And if you're not vaccinated, you're at great risk. And that is why I implore everyone to get out there and be vaccinated.
Now, Dr. Bob, the CDC says the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines may have caused heart problems for more than 1,200 Americans out of the millions who've been vaccinated. We know this problem has especially impacted teens and young adults. What do young people and their parents need to know before getting the shot, or what would you want them to know if they're debating whether to get the shot?
What we want them to know, Joe, is that this is a rare side effect of the 2-shot injection. It usually occurs after the second shot. It is easily treatable. It happens 2 days as a rule after the second shot with an anti-inflammatory medicine, with an intravenous medicine called immunoglobulin, which we give routinely to patients that get myocarditis and or pericarditis, which is the lining of the heart being inflamed, that this is easily treatable. And the risk of getting your COVID variant infection and not being vaccinated far outweighs the development of this very, very rare cardiac ailment, which has no long-lasting effect on any young person. It occurs, by the way, mostly in young men between the ages of 16 and 24 after the second shot, but very rare, Joe.
Let's talk about schools. We can expect to see more kids in the classroom this fall. Now, here's what CDC Director Rochelle Walensky told Lester Holt about that.
Will it look identical to what it looked like 2 or 3 years ago? It may not. We've learned a lot. Just like the country is really heterogeneous in terms of its disease rates right now, as well as its vaccination rates, I expect that some of the policies in schools will be similarly heterogeneous.
All right, so it's June right now. We don't know when kids younger than 12 will be able to even get vaccinated. So what might classrooms look like in the fall?
Well, I think classrooms are going to look like they're going to be very interesting, because we're going to suggest that prevention strategies continue between grades kindergarten through grade 12. And that means that teachers, ancillary staff should be vaccinated, should wear masks, should keep socially distancing. We also advise that people or students get tested and teachers get tested for the actual virus. This is a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. So wearing a mask, social distancing, washing one's hands, keeping the desks and the classrooms clean are really, really important. And of course, watching out for the child that is symptomatic. Even a cold would be suspicious, but continued testing will help us eliminate that one infected child in the classroom who can spread the virus to others. That's what I recommend, Joe.
All right, Dr. Bob Lahita, we always appreciate your expertise. Thank you so much for being on this morning.
Thank you.
We want to return to the scene of the deadly building collapse in Miami. Witnesses say the early morning collapse looked like a bomb went off, and the mayor of Surfside called it a, quote, catastrophic failure.
We're hearing some from guest Sam Brock, our colleague, was on the ground, or from residents rather, and described a conversation he had earlier with a witness talking about possibly other people still being trapped in this building. We know right now that this was a partial building collapse, over 100 units in all in this condo building, but about 40 to 50 were in the portion of the building that collapsed. The mayor of Surfside confirming that there is at least one person dead at this point. He talked about this, you said it, Joe, as a catastrophic collapse, a catastrophic failure of this building. He said there was work going on the roof of this building, but in no way should that have caused something like this to happen. I believe this building was built in the early 80s, about 1981, so 40 years old, give or take. This is about 20 minutes away from the heart of South Beach that so many people know so well. You have to imagine how busy this area is. This is summer. We don't know exactly how many people were in that building, but again, we do know at this point that at least one person is dead. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Joe, the mayor said at least 10 injured so far. They have some 80 units from Miami-Dade Fire Department on the ground helping to assist with search and rescue efforts. The mayor of Surfside saying that they have dogs out there trying to find signs of life, but so far he said they haven't picked up anything to indicate that. But a devastating, ongoing, developing situation. Again, what we know right now is that one person is dead. There are injuries. We are trying to learn more, and we'll bring you more as soon as we can.
Yeah, we have teams on the ground. Again, the cause of it is unclear at this point. The extent of injuries, the amount of fatalities at this point, we know at least one has died, and a search and rescue effort continues throughout the morning.
Cities across the United States are seeing a startling rise in gun violence this summer, and the Biden administration is rolling out a new strategy to try and combat it. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Mimily joins us now. Mike, good to see you this morning. Tell us, what did President Trump say about how they're going to try and tackle what appears to be a growing gun violence crisis?
Well, Ellison, when the president sat down yesterday with local community leaders and law enforcement, he told the group, I've been at this a long time. Remember, Biden, of course, chairman of the Senate Judiciary, was the author of the 1994 crime bill that was credited with a downtick in violent crime during the 90s. But now this president seeing what we're all seeing, a real surge in violence, especially in cities. And yesterday he spoke specifically about the influence and the spread of guns on the streets, something he wants to target. Take a listen.
If you willfully sell a gun to someone who's prohibited from possessing it, if you willfully fail to run a background check, if you willfully falsify a record, if you willfully fail to cooperate with the tracing request or inspections, my message to you is this: we'll find you and we will seek your license to sell guns. We'll make sure you can't sell death and mayhem on our streets. It's an outrage. It has to end, and we'll end it, period.
So part of what the president announced yesterday was ramping up enforcement of existing gun laws, like what you just heard him talking about, clamping down on firearms dealers who do not provide the background checks as required. But another part of this, because the White House thinks that the pandemic and the dislocating effects of the economic downturn that followed really are a part of this surge, is freeing up COVID relief money to allow local police departments to hire and train more officers to put more cops on the streets.
And Mike, this is obviously not a new discussion, not a new debate for this country. And oftentimes it seems like we aren't going to progress much further than the discussions. I know the Biden administration has also been pursuing legislative gun control options, but so far we really haven't seen any movement there. Is there any indication, any sense that we actually could see some sort of legislative action? Does the Biden administration have any sort of hope that what they want to see passed could actually move ahead?
Well, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, a Democrat, he has really been the leader, the point person in trying to work with Republicans to see if there's 60 votes, at least for strengthening background checks. That's something that's seen as the most likely avenue for legislative change on this measure. But it seems, as his talks have been undergoing for a number of weeks now, that there hasn't been enough progress there. The president yesterday, as he was leaving his event, was asked if he has hopes of reauthorizing a ban on assault rifles. That was part of that 1994 crime bill that he authored. He said, I never give up hope, but clearly there's pretty long odds for legislative change on this score, Ellison.
And Mike, any sort of reaction from law enforcement in this? I mean, have they commented, or have you heard anything or gotten a sense of what law enforcement agencies think of Biden's speech yesterday? Are they tying the uptick in crime to gun violence? And do they think that some of the proposals he's laid out could be a fix? Or is that another one of those situations where a lot of different opinions and we really don't know where it goes from here?
Well, it was interesting, Ellison. There were sort of two buckets of reaction we heard from law enforcement yesterday, not really having much to do with the substance of the proposals the president laid out. One was they wanted to have more seats at the table at the discussion he had yesterday. There are those who think that the voice of law enforcement has not necessarily been heard as much as we've been having not just discussions about how to tackle crime, but broader issues of police reform in general. And then the other part of this was something sort of connected to that about the idea of defunding the police, the real push for justice that we've seen over the past year. Law enforcement officials think the president needs to do more in speaking out against this, because they feel that part of why we're seeing this uptick in violent crime is because the law enforcement community doesn't feel that anybody has their back in all this, and it's made it much harder for them to do their own jobs.
All right, Mike Nimbley in Washington, D.C., thank you so much for that.
Well, the president tries to tackle gun violence. He's also pushing forward on his months-long effort to pass an infrastructure bill. Top Democratic leaders met with senior White House officials yesterday to discuss a path forward, and the president is set to meet with a group of bipartisan negotiators today. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins us now. So, Leanne, some Democrats have voiced frustration with President Biden over the length of these infrastructure talks. So what did Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have to say after their White House meeting yesterday?
Good morning, Joe. It's not just the length of the talks that are frustrating some Democrats, especially the progressives, but the fear that a bipartisan infrastructure deal that is much smaller than what they would like would move through Congress, and then the rest of their priorities would be left on the chopping block. Well, what Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer yesterday said was that they were going to guarantee that a bipartisan package and a much bigger partisan package move together side by side. One cannot happen without the other. Let's listen to Leader Schumer.
One can't be done without the other. All of us agree to that. We can't get the bipartisan bill done unless we're sure of getting the budget reconciliation bill done. And we can't get the budget reconciliation bill done unless we're sure of the bipartisan. And I think our members across the spectrum realize that.
So that is an attempt to convince and persuade the progressive members of the party that they are not going to be left behind, because the reality is they need every single Democratic vote to pass anything that passes through Congress, and they need to make sure that their party is united and on board, Joe.
So President Biden will be meeting with the latest bipartisan group that's working to strike a deal on this. So what is the latest infrastructure package looking like?
Great question. These lawmakers have not given very many details, if any at all, about what is in this legislative package. We know that it's traditional infrastructure, roads and bridges and broadband and some mass transit. But the biggest hangups have been how to pay for it. We expect the biggest way to pay for it is by increasing IRS enforcement of people who do not pay their taxes, especially the wealthy. So we will find out hopefully later today after this meeting with the president on what exactly is in this package. We'll also know if there's any chance of this package getting the support it needs, Joe.
We'll get great answers to that great question. All right, Leanne, one more thing while I have you. Bipartisan negotiators also met yesterday to try to hammer out a police reform deal before the July 4th recess. How hopeful are lawmakers that they can get that one done?
Publicly, they say that they are optimistic that they can come to an agreement on some sort of framework as early as today. So that's a very big deal. But, Joe, I will say Mike was just talking about the crime and the role of law enforcement being in those discussions about the increase of crime. Well, law enforcement is playing a huge role in these police reform talks, and it's important to get them on board. And that has been a very big struggle for these negotiations. So we will see what comes up with it, what they come up with. But it's a very heavy lift, Joe.
All right. We know you'll be keeping an eye on all of it. Leanne, thanks so much.
Yep.
Time for a check on your morning news now weather.
Bill Cairns joins us now. Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. So we have two stories to talk about. One, severe weather in the middle of the country. A lot of people were woken up in the middle of the night in Nebraska, especially. And then this epic, historic, or whatever you want to call it, one of the worst heat waves in the history of the Pacific Northwest is coming this upcoming weekend. But first, did you see this last night? So tonight's actually the full moon. It was very close to being a full moon yesterday evening. It's right after the sun sets. This is called the strawberry moon. That's because Native Americans always indicated the June full moon was a good indication of when the strawberry picking was beginning, and it just looks beautiful. It's not pink or it's not reddish or anything. It's kind of a gold color, but it's beautiful. And tonight you'll see it, full moon right after the sun sets, just over the horizon too. So take a little peek later on today. So last night I mentioned these storms left their mark. A lot of damage in Nebraska, and they're still moving through areas of Iowa and Missouri. Kansas City's going to get some of these storms in about a half hour, and these will cause maybe a little bit more damage. They have been weakening ever so slightly, but we'll have another round of very strong storms later on this afternoon. That area of orange, the enhanced risk, especially from Columbia to Kansas City, right along I-70 and northwards. 16 million people at risk of severe storms today in the Midwest. Now let's talk about this. Well, we're going to call it unprecedented heat wave. It's possible that this will be the hottest temperatures anyone in this region of the country has ever experienced in British Columbia, Seattle, portions of Idaho, and Oregon. So this massive heat dome is building over the area. Hot air from the interior is going to push down the mountains, and we're going to see and challenge some all-time records. So the hottest temperature ever in Portland was 107 back in 1981. The hottest temperature in Seattle was in 2009 at 103. Here's the updated forecast for these regions. We think on Sunday, Portland should break their all-time hottest temperature. Seattle, 101, you'll come close to your 103. Spokane, we should come very close to breaking your all-time record. You get the idea here. And when you factor in that only 30% of people in Seattle have air conditioning, that's what makes this very dangerous, because at night it won't cool off that much. We get very concerned about people with medical conditions, and especially the elderly, when we have heat waves like this in an area of the country that is not used to it, guys. So Seattle's only had 2 previous days when they've hit 100 degrees. We think they're going to do that on Sunday. And how about Portland? A chance for 108. That's like Phoenix-like temperatures.
Yeah, you never expect to see those numbers for that part of the country. At least I don't.
No, and I lived in Seattle, and you're right. Most people don't have air conditioning there, so that's going to be a rough period. All right, Bill, thanks so much.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.